calculations by bomb technicians of explosives for detonations. The commanding officer of Emergency Services Division has conducted an all-hands supervisors training and implemented new requirements for documenting those calculations. These requirements include the physical measurement of weights whenever possible, an independent secondary review of all calculations, and oversight by the on-scene safety officer and commanding officer of emergency services. This is being done to ensure that our are within the recommended capacity levels for a total containment vessel. As I remarked earlier, I believe our people were unseen in stressful and dangerous conditions and operating with the very best intention on their knowledge, training, and experience gathered over the years. All have received basic and advanced training on explosives, including disposal protocols, and have been recertified as required every 3 years. However, appropriate individual or individuals accountable. Those involved have been removed from the field pending the outcome. ATF is also conducting refresher training for the entire bomb squad on explosive material detonations, including field calculations methodology. Additionally, as information is access, this department would learn from those others and will move aggressively to adopt those practices. In addition to consulting with the ATF and outside bomb squads, the FBI has tentatively agreed to conduct a more comprehensive review of our systems and protocols to ensure that we're in compliance with national standards. Finally, I've also ensured the Office of Inspector General will have full and unencumbered access to the department, including any investigative material and the ATF NRT investigation. As I understand, the Commission President has directed that independent investigation. I will take certainly questions and comments direction here in a moment. I want to move from that event to another event that happened this past Saturday. And my information is more basic at this point. But I want to cover and address concerns that arose from a protest that occurred on Saturday in the Mid-City area involving the 2700 block Wilshire Avenue and the We Spa location. Earlier this month, on July 3rd, there was approximately 300 individuals that assembled there in a protest and counter-protest group over a dispute involving the spa's allowance of a transgender individual to utilize their location. Complaints from patrons there were concerned because of the patrons' exposure of male genitalia in an area for women, and they that this was appropriate. However, of state law, the location is in full compliance, and this dispute, unfortunately, has in its expression, as people differ in their opinion and in their feelings of conduct in regards to how loud, has gone to social media, has been weaponized, not by those that dispute the basic facts, but by what I believe are extremists that have attempted to hijack this dispute. And on July 3rd, extremists such as Proud Boys and others who advocate for violence, along with Black Bloc and Antifa identified affiliates, came to the location to protest their respective positions. And in the midst of that, assaulted each other and injured each other, requiring us to intercede and declare an unlawful assembly and dismiss and disperse those groups. From that came further calls for violence and further calls for protests. And this went well beyond the Los Angeles area and went to other parts of the country where other individuals began expressing their positions in this discussion. On July 10th, while there was a planned protest, it did not materialize. The department was prepared and set aside additional resources. It made outreach and engagement with organizers as we could. Organization again prepared for what we believed would be a protest and counter-protest, of which social media and other avenues communicated that there would be violence, and we could expect that. During our efforts to keep these two groups apart, we saw individuals that were armed with various weapons as well as helmets and shields, and expressed not just violent rhetoric, but began throwing projectiles to counter protesters and vice versa. Our efforts to intercede and to separate the groups were then met by violence against the officers. And I've seen published accounts on social media, also observed body-worn video of these interactions. During the course of this ordeal, we made 41 arrests. 40 of them were for failure to disperse after an unlawful assembly was declared based on the unlawful and violent actions of groups on both sides in an effort to restore order and protect the community as well as the surrounding neighborhoods, where acts of vandalism had also occurred. One individual was arrested for possession of an unlawful or illegal weapon or item at a protest. During these encounters, where officers were met with projectiles and physical violence, we had officers that were attempted, that their batons were attempted to be taken from them. We had officers that observed individuals throw projectiles at others and protesters and at officers. During the course of this, we utilized less lethal munitions a total of 10 times. 8 were from metropolitan resources that were there, and 2 were from patrol officers that used a beanbag. We had 9 baton strikes that also occurred, and my initial review of those with Deputy Chief Alabrada, who was the incident commander of this, and in defense of the officers themselves, they used those baton strikes to repel and push and have the individual retreat and release the baton. Fortunately, no officers were injured as a result of this. And we do have, I've seen public reports of at least one individual that was struck in the hand by a beam to step forward and for us to investigate this matter and determine their account, as well as we continue to investigate the overall. Most importantly, that the issue of public debate involving this location has spiraled into this expression of violence and physical attacks that we saw both on July 3rd, when the department was attempting to stand by and provide a safety net, but without interceding, and ultimately was required to do so. And then also this past Saturday, when in fact, when we did intercede, then we became the subject of the attacks, demonstrations to be completed in such a fashion. Let me move next to our categorical uses of force, where we had 2 officer-involved shootings involving animals, and then an officer-involved shooting involving an individual in the Hollywood area. As to the officer, the first occurrence was in Southeast area, and that occurred on July 5th. Patrol officers responded to an assault with a deadly weapon radio call. The officers' initial investigation that determined that no crime had occurred. The officers entered their police vehicle, and as they drove away, Ms. Johnson allegedly threw 2 glass bottles towards the officers. The officers exited their vehicle, at which point the dog charged one of the officers. The officer attempted to back away, but the dog continued to charge, resulting in striking the dog with a deadly weapon on a police officer. Force Investigation Division did respond and is investigating this incident. On that same day in South, 53 in the afternoon, an officer-involved shooting occurred in the area of Figueroa Street and 132nd Street. There, a South Traffic Division motor officer was investigating a traffic collision at the intersection, and while attempting to make contact with a potential witness, a large German Shepherd emerged from the parking lot. The officer attempted to back away from the animal. However, it ran towards the officer while shooting. The officer fired 2 rounds, pistol striking the animal. The dog was located a short distance away and transported to an animal hospital for treatment. I do not. Finally, on the 15th of July at approximately 11:30 in the morning in the Hollywood area, at the 6700 block of Hollywood Boulevard, there officers responded, uniformed patrol officers, to a radio call of a man with a gun. Who he is, he was a male white. Upon exiting the officer's vehicle, the officers approached the individual and ordered him to drop what they believed to be a gun. The individual turned, faced the officer, extending his right arm, and pointed the object in their direction, resulting in officer-involved shooting. The individual fell to the ground and was taken into custody without incident. was struck by gunfire and transported by rescue ambulance to the nearby hospital, where he was pronounced deceased shortly thereafter. The object possessed by the individual was thought to be a firearm, was later determined to be a metallic butane lighter with a pistol-like grip handle. Additionally, a folding knife with a .3 was locked in the open position. Another individual that we believe as a customer at a nearby location that may have been struck by one of the rounds fired, and a graze wound to her leg. She was aid was rendered, and investigation continues as to whether or not that was the result of the officers involved shooting. Force Investigation Division did respond to the scene and are investigating this incident. This instance also, I spoke with the California Attorney General's office, and investigators from that office to the officer involved shooting scene, as the state has determined that it'll exercise its prosecutorial jurisdiction for this incident. This is a reflection of Senate Bill AB 1506, which defines a person with a replica weapon as unarmed and subject to their jurisdiction. Although the suspect individual was allegedly also armed with a knife, the Department of Justice has determined that the initial threat posed by the knife was the primary cause of the OIS. And therefore, they're going to exercise their prosecuting jurisdictional aspect. They have asked LAPD to conduct the investigation, including the collection and preservation of evidence. I spoke with the head of their investigative unit that evening, and our full cooperation, and the feedback I've continued to receive from their office is that they are very pleased with the investigative protocols and our full cooperation and their unencumbered access to accomplish their stated responsibilities. Moving over to crime information, briefly, we have a overall reduction in Part 1 crime in the state of Los Angeles of 4.5%. That's 2,900 fewer crimes this year versus last. However, our concern remains with homicides, which have increased 29.6%. That's 47 additional homicides this year versus last. And our victim shootings, which have increased 43%, which is 236 additional victims that have been shot. These are outgrowths of primarily street violence. However, this weekend was particularly violent, occurred in the North Hollywood area involving a dispute over music, in which a suspect was arrested who came downstairs. This information was captured on video and murdered resident over this dispute. At a Rite Aid, a clerk working in the Northeast area over the weekend, attempting to just conduct store operations when two young individuals entered the store and attempted to steal a beer. It was classically known as a beer run. The clerk's efforts to intercede that resulted in one of the individuals producing a handgun and shooting the clerk, resulting in his death. Then lastly, the Bonaventure Hotel in the downtown area over the weekend. Two individuals had checked there, been there for a couple weeks, and upon leaving, apparently, for unknown reasons still to me, the male viciously assaults his companion and murders her in a public area. We have seen instances of mental health crisis, suicides increase, and disputes senselessly. This weekend is particularly poignant to remind ourselves that the challenges that we've spoke about in the increase in violent crime are real. Collectively together in our efforts to stem this increase. Finally, in regards to our personnel strength, I'm happy to report that we did initiate, opened our first academy class in some months this past July 5th. And of the candidates that we hired, give me one moment, I want to report on our diversity and our efforts to continue to expand our representation of women, African Americans, and Asian Pacific Islanders. In our July class of 59 individuals, 29% of them were African American candidates and recruits. And of the 59 individuals, Filipino, which is still above our group, but the overall tenor of this, as I want to report, is my thanks and appreciation to personnel department, as Aaron McCraney and our recruitment and employment division for their outreach and engagement with the applicants to seek those that are qualified and also representative of all the diverse communities of Los Angeles. In the last 3 months, we've nearly 2,600 police applicants, men and women, individuals to join this department. I look forward as we go this year with an ambition to hire 700 and 403 total reserves. I appreciate your patience with what is admittedly a long.
Thank you, Chief, for that report. I'm going to focus most of my questions and comments on the June 30th explosion. And just to correct something, Chief, the Inspector General was not directed yesterday. He was directed much earlier, as soon as should include a complete recitation TF explosive experts evaluated. That's a separate investigation. And while I don't expect the Inspector General to go into the specifics of the explosives, I do expect that investigation to be comprehensive, including a review of all training protocols for the bomb squad, whether that training is and was in fact practices, if not, how to improve it. Everything regarding the calculations, regarding the amount of the explosions, decisions made, the series of decisions made that led to the detonation, whether transportation of the explosive materials really was not an option, whether other options did exist. Residential community, whether other experts were consulted, whether the truck was appropriately maintained or had achieved its end of life or near end of life. A review of the bomb squad, overall a review of the calls that have been, it has responded, the use of that vehicle, and generally speaking, the bomb squad in general. So in part, we can determine whether or not it should continue to exist in its current form or whether there should be